Are you tracking what they are prompting, or you're tracking where they came from and then how they behave within the website?
With generative AI, it's kind of different because you've got something called prompt sensitivity.
Do you think websites will be relevant as a database for the LLM model?
Do I need to invest in a very graphically rich site that the AI doesn't care about? And the only way to really get that, ask your customers.
Hello, everyone. Today, I've got the pleasure to have here James. James was one of the speakers at Brighton SEO this year, 2025, in October. And he's been open to join us in this great podcast. So I wanted to make sure that all of you hear from James. Please introduce yourself, tell them who you are, and let's get some fun today.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is James Hocking. I work for a startup called Get Heard Online, and we kind of focus on tracking generative AI output, but particularly from the stance of revenue tracking, and e-commerce. My background is software and data engineering. Up until probably 2023, I was working for a company called Sage, who produced accounting software, and I was their director of advanced analytics, working specifically across marketing, helping them understand their customer. And then around then, we pivoted into a consultancy, and then eventually what became Get Heard Online.
James, tell us, how did that happen? How did you decide to go from corporate into building your own business in the AI space?
It's actually a really long journey. So around about 2001, I started my own first attempt at a startup.
Yeah.
It was for people familiar with coding, it was like a really basic early version of VS Code.
Okay.
And we had some modicum of success. We had about 500,000 downloads, but a lot of this predated, even predated Facebook. So it was a different world. But after about 4 years, we realized it wasn't going to work financially. We weren't going to be able to give up our day jobs. So we stopped and went back into the corporate world. And then as around COVID, I think, we started, my business partner and I, we started kind of shooting ideas around. And then I had started working quite heavily in generative AI around, I guess, ChatGPT 2.5 or 2.0, sorry. And again, from a corporate perspective, using it. And it started to foster ideas about how we could use this technology. And so at the end of 2023, we then decided it was a make or break, now or never. So we kind of jumped
Wow. Okay.
and
So
didn't look back.
that was the time around when Profound was starting to, well, I don't know if they actually started around that time. Was it before
Yeah.
they became as big as we know them today, or?
The funny thing is, I was doing consultancy at the time, and one of my customers there, they had a guy who was approached by an agency in Austria,
Okay.
um, whose name escapes me, but they produced a diagram, a graph of the analysis of output of generative AI, and it's like right there and then I thought that is an amazing idea. But there was no one else doing it at the time, and then of course a couple of months later, Profound came along.
Hmm.
I think they got their seed funding. They did the same thing, believe it or not. But of course, all of this predated the use of citations. Perplexity came out shortly after and started doing citations. So, anyone who's used generative AI, if you ask it to create a citation, it will just make something up. So the data quality was a bit poor, but the idea was there.
I'm curious to know, James, what is the difference for people to know between tools like Profound and GetHeard.online?
I I think it's a good question. I think when you look at a tool like Profound, they are um, the main competitor in the market at the moment. I think they have a good solid tool. They harvest data like most people. From what I can see from what they're offering at the kind of the self-service tier, you get the things like visibility tracking and the sentiment analysis and things like that, which pretty much most people can do. I think the piece that they push the most at the moment is what they call the Prompt Explorer,
Mm-hmm.
which is an interesting tool because the thing about a prompt, when you enter a prompt into a tool like ChatGPT,
Mm.
um, when certainly in Europe and about 15 states in the USA, and then also in China and Asia for that matter, you have a GDPR, kind of the General Data Protection Regulation type legislation in place. And the moment someone authenticates with a tool, that that law kicks in. So
Mm.
you can't a company such as OpenAI can't sell prompts of authenticated users because it's not their data.
Right.
So how can you offer this type of service where there are other companies like whose name escaped me where you as a volunteer you can say I volunteer for my internet usage to be tracked
Right.
because and this data is then sold on to give demographic information and things like that. Well, part of that you can capture the prompts people enter, the search queries they enter into google.com.
Mm.
And this can then be sold on. It's called clickstream data.
So,
So you can do it that way. So they offer that type of service as well, which could be valuable if the data that it's collected from or the people it's collected from matches who you're servicing as a business, for example. There's other players in the market as well, not just Profound, and they offer somewhere in between. With a company like Get Heard, what we try to do is my background is like the kind of enterprise data analytics around marketing. And marketing has always been about, uh, in a large proportion, about paid media.
mm.
And I'm investing in a set of keywords to do pay per click. And I want a return on investment so I understand my customer acquisition cost and things.
Mm.
So we look at it from that lens. So we come at it. So yes, we're doing the tracking and the visibility. Is the responses on brand and things like that. But fundamentally, how do I then attribute someone starting their journey on an AI tool like ChatGPT
Mm.
and that resulting in a natural sale? And how can I say that that sale is attributed back to the AI or the AI as a channel?
So
So
you
that's where I think we're different. But so we kind of look at more of it from the e-commerce slant rather than
so you're focusing more on the final attribution part of where the actual sale came from, what happened during and after. And can I ask, this is something also along the lines of what you were mentioning before. How can you access the data from the user who is using let's say, who's using ChatGPT or Perplexity? Are you tracking what they are prompting, or you're tracking where they came from and then how they behave within the website?
if we look at how it's been done up to now, so you can't track what prompts are being used. And if you look at, say, weblogs, you will know. You can look at the what's called the HTTP referrer, or if you're in Google Analytics GA4, you can look at the session referrer, and you'll be able to see that, let's say, ChatGPT.com was the referrer for the inbound request. But you wouldn't know what was the original prompt. You wouldn't even know what was the response. You just know that the previous site was ChatGPT.com.
Got it.
So the way you can go about it is with if you look at the way it worked with keywords, for example, so with the traditional kind of search engine results page, you would have tools like either the Google Search Console, you could do the Ahrefs, SEMrush to name, three, not to be limited to others in the market. But in this regard, you kind of say which keywords are tracking against which domain, and that's a relatively easy question to ask because if I go to google.com from
Mm.
a mobile device in the USA, for example, and type in sneakers, for example, I can guarantee that no matter how many times I submit that request, I'm going to get the same response back.
Right.
So that consistency means that traditional web search tools, are really easy to quantify. So someone can say, I want to track against this keyword, and I can measure the success of how well I'm doing that keyword just by looking at the search results.
Mm.
With generative AI, it's kind of different because you've got something called prompt sensitivity. So even though at a lowest level an AI is what's called deterministic, what that means is given the same input, I will always get the same output.
Mm.
However, people are going to scream at the podcast and say, that's not true. I type in the same prompt and it changes. Well, that's by design. So the large language model has randomness built into it because we know as people, it's trying to act more like how do people act? And with chatbots in the past, we would inject certain keywords and phrases into chatbot responses because we wanted to humanize them. And this is the same thing with this. So now, if I submit the exact same prompt to generative AI, to ChatGPT, through the same device in the same location, I'll get a different response. And that's by design. So now you can't, that paradigm of tracking a keyword becomes very hard. So what you have to do is say, as a customer, sorry, as a business, who is my customer and how do they think? How do they talk? How do they ask questions? And then you start tracking those questions, and you have to track as many versions of that question. And I try to show this in Brighton SEO, where it says, here's the same question but phrased slightly differently. And as a person, you can look at it and say, oh, you're asking for the same thing, but the responses were very different.
Mm.
One had brands and kind of referral hyperlinks, and one of them didn't. So it's kind of a long way of saying it's a juxtaposition, but yeah, you have to track lots of prompts and know your customer really well.
And jumping ahead, but I feel I have to ask this question, James. So, knowing this, how would you recommend we optimize our websites nowadays? Because if we have different ways of asking the same question in a website, obviously we might be creating a site that's, in the eyes of Google, really spammy, right? Especially because nowadays I feel like, I mean, I've been reading and I think we know that how we ask questions on ChatGPT is really different to how we search on Google. We ask really long tail questions, sometimes paragraphs. So obviously, I wouldn't be comfortable simply having, very different versions of the same questions, which again can be really long, with very similar answers on a website. How would you recommend to move forward for people listening to this?
I was this for me the starting point. I've seen a lot over the last 12, 48 months of people said SEO is dead. And I think that is disingenuous because at the moment, so the way large language models work is when you create a brand new one or you create the next version of one, it goes through like a 3 or 4 step process, and you create something called a foundation language model. And this is essentially where you're trying to define the vocabulary, and this is trained on data you can get publicly, or you can buy, but they're probably publicly. So this is where people talk about, is your website in the trained data? Now, you then go through a number of processes depending what the outcome's going to be. So Claude, for example, is very code orientated model. So you want it to write code. So those next few steps are all about teaching it what is good code and what's bad code.
Mm.
Where if you get a more general model like ChatGPT, you try to get it to tackle lots of different things. So these are the images of what a cat looks like. This is what code looks like. This is what a good answer to what are the best trainers looks like, for example. And so there's one side of it there. The next side of it is that when the AI determines that it needs to answer a very up-to-date question, that's when it's going to go to the web. So what does this mean that SEO is not dead? Well, for 2 reasons. One, the training process is ongoing. It takes years. It's not a very fast thing. So you need one. You'll see this in the weblogs. You'll see 2 types of bot for like ChatGPT. You'll see one which is like a trainer who's gathering material for training, and you'll get another one which is gathering like the real-time answers. And so you need SEO is important because until or even the AIs create their own search indexes, you need to be found, and the way to be found is you need to be on Bing or Google. So you need to rank well on these sites. So the need to be ranking well within a traditional search engine results page is still important. The next thing though is just because you're ranking well on a search engine results page, we know that the AI doesn't really care about ranking. It's going to make its own decision as to which page is important. Now, the reason why you need to rank well is because the Google cut down how many pages they return in the standard results page. So you need to be in that small demographic. So to your question, one, you good SEO practice. So have good structure site, have the good defined kind of topics that are on point. And the third one is well, I spoke about at Brighton, the schema. You want to make sure that your website is very easily machine readable.
Mm.
So I know Google invested heavily in doing JavaScript rendering so they can scrape JavaScript rendered sites, but the AIs, as far as I can tell, don't care.
Yeah.
They will scrape your site and they don't care about JavaScript. They will not wait. So if your web page that comes back has no content because the JavaScript didn't run, there you're already excluded. But yeah, no, I think the good starting place is just do good SEO practice. Is a good starting point. Now the second step is the bit that we kind of work on at the moment is what is the right structure and what are the right topics. And there's a lot of data science we're doing around that at the moment to solve that very question. But keep in mind that anyone who says they can do this is that all of these models are closed. What that means is that the rules that they use to determine what is truly important and what isn't is will always be a black box. So whilst we can use data science to try and work out what we think, they will always it's always what we think as opposed to what we definitively know. So there's that to keep in mind as well. So you're going to get the 80% view as opposed to 100% view is kind of the way to think about it.
Going a little bit away from the technical side,
Yeah.
in terms of how we structure the page using
Yeah.
schema and so on. Um, can we still, so I have two questions. Do you think websites, as we know them nowadays, will be relevant or as relevant as they are today to pack all this data and work as, I want to think about in as a database for the LLM model? And the second question, how should we structure our content within the website? Should we still think of content clusters? And then how should we format each of each one of those pages so we continue respecting having really in-depth topics for the different pages or articles that we write about?
Well, that's a good question, or two good questions. My personal kind of vision. So I got asked this last week. So where do I think this is going? My personal belief, when I left Sage, one of the first pieces of work I got asked to do was a threat's the probably a bit severe word, but it was an analysis of which direction will the internet turn in the next 3 to 5 years.
Hmm.
Um, and will what we know about the internet today still exist? And what this company wanted to find out is they were investing heavily in a very visually attractive, informational rich, lots of marketing qualified lead material and things like that. And I found what I learned was at the end of 2023, the hardware manufacturers of mobile devices, so Google, Samsung, Apple, they had all in the technology had already been invented to run what's called a let's call it a language model like ChatGPT, but on an actual device. So at the moment, if you're using Gemini on an Android or using Siri on a phone, more often than not, it will send a network request. It's going to send the request on from the device down to a server in wherever in the world and get the response back.
Hmm.
And so the moment you go you go into like a zero connection area, your AI doesn't work for you anymore. So how do you fix that? And so at the end of 2023, all the manufacturers had developed the hardware that could go on a cell phone and run what's called a small language model, which is just like ChatGPT, but does a very specific thing like text only, for example. And however, it was like the Samsung S25, the Pixel 9, and the not to ignore other brands, but those two had the capability to run this type of AI on the device and be completely disconnected and still work. And it occurred to me at that point that the moment this happens, the idea of a virtual intelligent assistant is going to be huge because you'll now have an AI And now we talk about these other technologies like MCP protocols, like the Model Context Protocol, as a means to connect to other data sources in a standard way. We now get this point where we are so close to having something that is literally going to be your personal assistant in the truest sense.
Mm.
You want to go on a holiday, or they see on your calendar that you've got 2 weeks free, that maybe you want to go on holiday, they get you an offer, and they've already booked it for you, got your plane tickets, your hotel booked, and you didn't really have to do anything. So we're so close. So I said, the moment that happens, do we need these very visual rich websites? Because we create visually rich, persuasive websites because we're trying to attract people. But the moment a virtual assistant comes in and acts as our personal guide, like Christmas, we're coming up to Christmas right now, and you're trying to find, you've got Black Friday offers. Maybe I buy my Christmas presents now for Black Friday. But am I going to go around, spend like 2 hours trawling Amazon to find the perfect presents on the best discount? Or would I rather just say, assistant, I need 5 presents for my family. You know who they are. You know what ages they are. You know whether they're male or female. Can you just go take care of that for me so I can go off and do the stuff I want to do? And for me, that's where we're heading. And so when it comes back to the website structure, those very persuasive, at the moment, we spend all of this money trying to create very persuasive copy, but a machine doesn't care about persuasion. So I think the way it will change is that the internet will be there, but I think it'll be more of like what we do as a people will say, how do I get the information from my site the most attractive so that when it's in the response comes out, the generative AI response is very persuasive on my behalf. Do I need to invest in a very graphically rich site that the AI doesn't care about? So I think that's where I think it's going to change. I think it's we what we our generation and generations before us are used to very colorful sites. I think the next generation, next 10 years, people will switch. I think the assistants will take over.
Got it. So in that sense, we could argue that websites will still be relevant. The point is, how do we make them feel, make them look relevant in the eyes of AI or all these models to be picked up? Might not be just the copy, it might be more important to have a proper structure, proper formatting, proper schema.
Yeah, sorry, yeah. I think that the thing to keep in mind is that the AI has no experience memory.
Hmm.
So, for example, if you look at my backdrop, it's from Zoom. It's meant to be of an office, but immediately just looking at the picture, you can see, well, it looks like a warehouse.
Hmm.
I can look through the window and see it's not a sunny day. And I can see maybe there's slightly orange, ready leaves on the trees, so maybe it's the autumn. And I can discern that because my experience of what autumn's like, what I think a warehouse looks like, and things like that. And I can pull all of those things together. The AI doesn't do that. It's very on point. Where when we write something, so for example, if I start saying CRM, that acronym means something to a marketing person. Or even actually, no, let's say GEO. That's probably a much better one. If I say GEO, it to some people it now means generative engine optimization. But that acronym was actually used by geopolitics and geology long before GEO from an SEO perspective came along. So depending which community I talk to, I have to be very careful which acronym I'm using.
Hmm.
So from a content perspective, you have to do the same. As a person, I could read a document and see that GEO clearly doesn't mean geology in this case. The AI, if it comes across something, it may or may not understand that you're talking about generative engine optimization or not because it doesn't have this other context. So that's when it comes to structuring sites, structuring content, you really need to be on point, less persuasive, and more about what is it. If I'm giving some information that I want someone to repeat, without it being Chinese whispers, type of thing, how would I structure that content? And
Yeah.
that's the way you should start thinking about it, rather than trying to persuade the AI your content is the right one.
And talking about the content itself, I mean, we can argue then that our content itself needs to be also valuable in the eyes of AI to be picked up by the model.
Yeah.
Given that people are not gonna enter websites anymore, they're gonna, rely on an agent to plan
Maybe.
and do everything in the future. Which, to be honest, I agree with you. I think something like that is gonna happen.
Yeah.
But in that case, how do we make sure that the content is picked up slash relevant for the AI models? What is the most important thing beyond the structure, beyond the schema, the content itself? What can we do with it?
Okay. So the first one is to come back to the SEO, like we mentioned earlier. If you're not in the search results, from a trained data perspective, because I mentioned that gets taught over a much longer period of time. We had one customer who they had done 4 acquisitions in the last 12 months, but as far as the AI was concerned, they were still 4 companies.
Hmm.
Because that was its knowledge base was fixed in 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Um, So that's why I did. Someone says, well, I may as well not invest in my content anymore because the AI is just gonna do what it wants. Says, no, 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 no. Your strategy has to be, I'm going to create content that's got to have a shelf life of 4 years, and then I need another set of content which is going to be what's happening right now. And then also like just I think again from the SEO perspective, content clusters is really important
Hmm.
because as I mentioned, the AI has no experience, no causal memory like we do. So if you're using industry specific terms that have no reference,
Hmm.
then you will probably get pushed aside because unless you can be very, very clear. So when it comes down to your language has to be very, very clear, be quotable, essentially. So if you were going to create a press release, you wouldn't use that language which is so common internally. You would use something that was more, the newspaper would pick up and just print because there is an assumption that the person reading this has inside information about how a specific, industry vertical works. That works really well. And then the other thing to remember is that these AIs, the types of questions they're being asked to solve right now is, if you think like decision time. So I'm in that sales funnel. I'm making a decision. I want to compare things.
Hmm.
So having text to compare with other text is quite hard to do. But
Hmm.
if I was comparing 2 televisions, I wouldn't I wouldn't take the glossy kind of sales pitch at the top. I'd be taking the specs. So I'd be asking questions as an AI. I'd say, well, what's the size of your room?
Hmm.
Okay, because if I put an 88, a 2 meter TV in a room that's probably uh, I don't know, maybe 3 by 4 meters, it's going to be too much. So you then it's the AI will look at those types of things. And this is why schema comes very important because it helps you to organize the information points that you want to share.
Hmm.
But you can do the same thing with like good HTML content. If you have like sections and articles and those tags,
Hmm.
you're organizing in the same way. So you're trying to make it as easy as possible for the AI not only to categorize what you're talking about, but to compare what you're talking about.
Oh, that's really useful. Well, do you think that topic clusters and having like in-depth data content within each article will continue to be relevant, or do you think that having up-to-date information, something unique and valuable to the reader and AI, something that's not mentioned by other websites, it's more valuable than actually,
Yeah.
you know, um, mapping your entire website with different topics and obviously having a cluster around everything.
Um, I think for the time being, because the industry is in its infancy, I think the what has worked well for SEO, I think those are probably the best guide right now.
Hmm.
The one thing I will say though is every AI is different.
Hmm.
So in the past, I think was it being on a desktop commanded 12% of the market share, and dark and things like that took a bit, but predominantly it was all um, Google. So we only really competed about the Google index and what was important, the EE rules and things like that.
Hmm.
So when you came up with your evergreen content, it was important. And evergreen content is still valuable because the training process will look at evergreen content.
Mm.
And so making sure that this content is relevant to how your business is right now is important. The timeliness, the reason why an AI will look to read, to search the internet. And so this is something we do actually. We can tell you certainly for ChatGPT what web search query was used and what the SERPs results were. And so again, this will help you to see who is actually ranking. What are the keywords? So again, I think at the moment using keywords and tracking keywords is still hugely valuable exercise. I wouldn't. I've seen some people saying, "Oh no, generative engine optimization is so completely different. You should throw away your SEO practice." Yeah, I wouldn't advise that.
Yeah.
I'd say keep your SEO practice, but look to uh, a, a, a change your strategy. So just like you would have done with content clusters and structure and things like that, it's still highly relevant.
How how would you do the brainstorming part? Would you still work with keywords to map out your calendar, or would you look into also how people are asking these long tail questions on LLM models to put it as part of your calendar, content calendar?
Yeah.
So how would you, because now many people, I feel like we still optimize for keywords. So we still try to create content around keywords. But again, the questions that we are seeing coming from LLM models are way longer.
Yeah.
The approach that I've been taking, just to add something here, is that I make sure that the content for that keyword is as thorough as it can be, with the right headlines, um, metadata, and so on, so that every possible question gets answered. But I always wonder, is this the best way? Should I be um, taking a different approach and optimize things from the start with the data that I see from LLM models? How would you approach this?
So the way we advise at the moment, what I'm finding is that certainly around Gen Z, they are more likely to use these technologies, and I think they as a group, they haven't been indoctrinated to the same degree of how to Google. So
Mm,
they're like the verb of Googling. We're used to typing in like three or four keywords and that would be it. But as a group, they're not doing that.
mm,
However, there's still a huge number of people who are. So whilst I've seen the research that says everyone is asking longer questions, the only reason you can find that people are asking longer questions is to survey them.
mm,
So my recommend would be is if you've got a customer base, go and interview them. Ask them, how did you find us? If you know they came to you through like a Perplexity or ChatGPT, ask them what question they entered, and
mm,
then start tracking that information. And that's going to probably give you the best insight because at least these are people who fit your business.
mm,
The challenge when you see an article online that says, "Oh, people are using bigger, longer tail questions." I spoke with one client who wasn't appearing in the search results, but their business was to serve local government,
mm,
and local government you can only buy through local government procurement. So and so as a the there were not really anyone talking about how to use this. You can't go to a Reddit group and say, "How do I buy through local government?" Because if you're in local government, you already know how to buy through local government type thing. And so when someone says you need to start tracking longer questions, that may be true for your industry or demographic, but there's no guarantee. And the other thing to take into account, there's a huge number of people in like millennials, Gen X, and baby boomers who still Google in the traditional sense,
mm,
who are not doing long tail questions. So at the moment we're in that transition. So we're kind of be aware of that demographic. But if your business isn't serving Gen Z, I would focus more on the how do people search and have done for the past. If you're targeting more younger generation, then I would be okay. So what type of questions are they asking? And the only way to really get that, ask your customers. Do I need to invest in a very graphically rich site that the AI doesn't care about? Do I need to invest in a very graphically rich site that the AI doesn't care about? Do I need to invest in a very graphically rich site that the AI doesn't care about?
Thing to do. James, I think we got carried away for the first time
Yeah,
in the entire video podcast by your amazing experience and
thank you.
knowledge. Really, really enjoying it. Let's jump into GetHeard.online.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the marketing side of things. All right, so James, tell me, for GetHeard.online, how did you find your first customers?
Network, quite
Right?
literally, the network. We'd learned in the past that if you go up on like pay per click straight away without knowing who your customer base really is, Google is very good at taking your money
Mm,
without a rate of return.
yeah.
And we also learned very quickly that if someone wants to buy from you, they will.
Mm,
What we tend to find is if someone comes on the phone and says they, a lot of people want free advice. We get that a lot. Can I have free consult? They don't say that, but they don't want to buy.
right.
But what we found was, certainly in the early days, if someone wants to buy, they will be very clear. You will be under no, there will be no confusion about whether they want to buy or not. So, but we found our network and when I say network, predominantly LinkedIn and people we knew were the most powerful sources
Mm.
to get us going.
So was it people you knew or you went out to meet them?
Um, a bit of initially who we knew, so people we'd worked with. And I think the reason why is that we had a lot of trust, or they believed in us because we had delivered for them in another world before. So they believed that we were capable of doing what we said we could do.
So the learning here is leverage your community,
Yeah,
uh, and it sounds to me that you have to be networking before you actually need the network.
yeah. But LinkedIn, I would say, and it's like established that, and we made the mistake because we built we knew it was because it's like a fast moving industry. So we built what we should have done is, and it's easy to say, but if we had actually gone into the network saying we were thinking of doing this,
Uh-huh.
and we kind of did back at the beginning of 2024 with the spreadsheet, but we should have fed gone further into our network to see who else. We started with quite a small pool.
How,
Um,
how did you know what features to present to this network that you had? Did you build things based on your experience and the ideas that you had in your mind, or did you go out first to test, research, and figure out what people might want?
Um, Again, I would say that we made another mistake is that we based it on experience
Okay.
and and you know I'd worked in marketing from a tech side for a long time. Um, but I think what we should have done is actually what is the real pain point? So what we found was, and kind of knew from our own experience, is that most businesses, if you start in like a medium to large size customer, they plan the next 18 months ahead as
Hmm.
a general rule. And that includes where they're going to spend money. So
Hmm.
even though the market says right now that generative search is probably going to be a really important thing,
Hmm.
the fact of the matter is most medium size upwards that they're not able to shift. They're like an oil tanker. So
Yeah.
you start talking to them now, you're really talking about what they're going to do in 2027.
Right.
So that's the other thing. So unfortunately, our network was based on very large companies
Hmm.
where if to move fast, you really need small companies who can, someone's going to get a credit card out and spend now, because they like the idea rather than building a business case, which may or not get funding, and that takes at least 6 months to do. So that the first thing we mistake. And so what we should have done is we should have gone further into our network and found smaller companies
Hmm.
where our network was actually a lot of enterprise companies. So
Are you now adapting that to this new idea of working with the smaller companies?
very much so in agencies. So we initially, I've recruited in agencies, in the past and stuff like that. But again, from a corporate lens, where I've not really thought as an agency, how do I operate as a business? I've got lots of clients. I want to keep them isolated and things like that. So we then adapted Get Heard to support the agency model. But that came later. But if we had reached out early on, we would have had that discussion early on and focused there. So yeah, I couldn't emphasize enough that it's actually if we'd gone out, found people, discussed what was important to them, and then built for them.
Mhm.
And building for yourself as well. We were building for ourselves, so we were like customer number one in a way because we use our own tool for ourselves.
Yeah.
So you then become also, there's no reason why your requirements are any less important. So
Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes, I mean, you are fixing a problem for a company.
yeah,
Maybe not everyone has the same problem, but some do. The idea in the end, I guess, is to grab a share of the pie, not all of it.
yeah, yeah.
You cannot fix everyone's problems.
No.
That's good. So at the moment, are you still focusing on networking? Are you running any SEO strategy, any PPC, anything else?
SEO, despite its importance, we're because again, it's time and where do you divide your time up? So I know we know full well that SEO you have to be seen in the network.
Mm.
Believe it or not, speaking about an SEO was important as well, because it's like in marketing you've got paid media, but you've got earned media. They for the cost of a train ticket and a hotel, I got to present. Okay, I had to submit ideas and had to get selected, but once I got selected, I that the PR we got from Brighton SEO has been invaluable. Again, the network SEO is, yes, it's on the list, but the when you're early on in your journey, it's actually you can create a lot of noise by doing SEO pay per click. You can create a lot of noise where if you're looking at your first 10, first 50 customers, they're the ones you're probably going to forge the tightest relationship with.
Yeah.
And if you're having to spend half your day dealing with leads, which may or may not go anywhere, where actually you've got 10 to 50 customers who are saying, we really want to be on this journey with you. So that's where we're focused at the moment.
Oh, nice. That's good. And
Yeah.
for what you say on Brighton SE, I think that was amazing. Because, well, first of all, the presentation was amazing, and secondly,
Thank you.
you're also presenting to the audience that you are
Yeah.
looking after, right? That you're going to be working with agencies, and those conferences are geared towards that type of audience.
Yeah.
Yeah, so one of the things that I see a lot online is that people try to think that building a SaaS is just simply building the product and then running some ads. And that is where many people run out of cash. And before they even have validated or even tested a product with one single client, they've already run out of budget. Right. So at the moment, it's mostly networking then for your company.
Yeah.
I have two questions. I think it's a good chance for you to share any coupons you might have for people listening to this
Yeah.
podcast. And also, second, do you offer any specific treatment or service to these companies you work now with, given that they are, I guess they are, some of the first customers you work with?
Absolutely. So, I mean, so from a coupon perspective, what we'd like to offer anyone who's listening, 20% off the first 3 months, and that would be either the tracking tool that we've got, but also the kind of the consultancy
Nice.
as well.
Appreciate that, James.
Thank you. But to what we do with the initial customers, we're still in that very much more hands-on where we really want because we're like what I would say an early implementer because whilst there are lots of companies coming out and trying to offer this as a service, generative AI really is a very different thing. So the way the neural network works is very different and requires a different approach, an additional approach, I would say. And so we understand that right now, people do need more help. Self-service for us is possible, but I think what you'd end up with is a tool that you're paying money for, but wouldn't actually, what is the return on investment? So we're doing more hands-on right now. I think when the practice becomes more, we've got the, once we have a better understanding of what questions are people really struggling with, and we can create that material and we can actually get people into a more self-service, like I'm stuck, can I watch this 30-second video to get me unstuck?
Mm.
Then I think we will start moving over to being more self-service. But for right now, yeah, there's the tool. We're here to help. Yeah, and we're literally kind of will yeah, we're here to help them, and we want people to be successful. We want them to understand how this fits into your existing practice, because it's something new, and it's more than just query fan out or that type of thing. It does require a different thought process.
Amazing. So that's getheard.online,
Yes,
20% discount for both consulting and the tool, the tracking tool,
yes.
the rank tracking, right?
It is tracking. Yeah. So the tool does a couple of things. It will allow you to track, but it also will do the recommendations. So we're different in the sense that we do the e-commerce bit. So whenever an AI kind of lifts the e-commerce, we grab that. But we also look at the way the content is structured, what was mentioned, what topics were mentioned, and how were they mentioned.
Right.
So we then go, so how can we, and this is where like the automated advice kicks in. So it says, okay, great, you've given me all of these KPIs, but what do I do now?
Mhm.
And so the tool will say, this is what we think you should be doing now.
Amazing. James, do you have any advice for people who are starting a business, maybe in the SaaS space, because you have already some experience, not only with Get Online, but also before? And also, what's your biggest challenge at the moment?
Um, Biggest challenge I'd say is time.
Okay.
Because when you're bootstrapping like we are, you do have to be very careful with money.
Mm.
And hiring people is expensive. The other thing I'd be wary of is I've been developing for like 30 years, and I use AI tools to help build, but you have to be very, very prescriptive about how you use them. Vibe programming and those things, I did actually try to allow the AI full control to build something,
Mm.
and the tools are just not there yet. So use the tools to speed you up, but don't you still need to be in full control. And if I was going to start from scratch, what I would do is go to your network, have a first off, have an idea that's personal to you. I think if you work on an idea because you think it's going to make you money,
Mm.
whilst everyone's going to say I want to make money. I mean, we go to work because we need to pay bills, so that's fine. But unless you actually have like a true understanding, I worked in like marketing for 30 years, so I like to think I had a good understanding of how marketing worked and paid media worked, and that really helped. What I didn't do is thinking, let's solve a neuroscience problem. I know nothing about neurology. I don't know what problems are relevant to them. So you could work on something. The last piece of advice I do, and I made this mistake in the past, is a marketplace is probably not the best place to start because not only do you have to find sellers to come to your platform, but you have to find buyers to come to your platform. Where if you create a problem where you only have to find buyers, it's it's half the challenge. So because you're already selling the bit that, so I would advise people not do marketplaces. I know Etsy is very well established and it's doing very, very well, but there's a reason why you can only think of Etsy and a few others because they're the outliers of success, not the norm.
Yeah.
So I would avoid that. But
It is actually very true indeed. I'm sure there are plenty of Etsy
yeah,
startups that didn't make it. It's a complicated world, I would say, having to
yeah,
pay some sellers. That is amazing, James. Thank you so much for sharing all this with us today. I know we got carried away by the SEO topic. I think it's super valuable. We haven't had anyone with this type of technical knowledge and experience in the podcast, so it is a huge pleasure to have you here. I hope we can meet again in the near future when things continue changing and you have more to share with us.
perfect. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you for the time. And I hope it was valuable to everyone.
Appreciate it. Thank you very much.